We've been told for decades that the day work stress disappears, fulfillment and peace will fall into place, effortlessly. But nearly 1 in 3 retired men is blindsided by depression in their first year, as decades of identity built around work quietly vanish. If retirement is meant to feel like the golden years, why does a sense of emptiness arrive instead? The answer isn't what most expect. In the decades after World War II, a new promise began to shape the way men thought about the end of work. Retirement was sold as a reward, a time when the grind of daily labor would be exchanged for effortless calm and satisfaction. Magazine pages from the 1950s showed silver-haired men in pressed slacks, smiling on sunlit fairways. A 1965 Banker's Life ad declared, "The golden years are here," while Prudential's 1958 campaign promised peace of mind in retirement. The message was clear. After years of earning a paycheck, tranquility was not just possible, but guaranteed. Television commercials in the 1970s carried these images further. Scenes of fishing boats at dawn, couples strolling beside lakes, and friends laughing over cards reinforced the idea that fulfillment would arrive the moment work ended. Retirement brochures echoed the same refrain. Freedom, ease, and contentment were simply waiting on the other side of the office door. These messages weren't just marketing, they became part of the social contract, quietly shaping what men expected from their later years. For a generation raised to believe that hard work would one day be repaid with peace, the myth was never questioned. Over time, it seeped into daily life, into the way fathers talked to sons, into the advice passed along at company farewells, into the small rituals that marked the end of a career. By the time men like Jim reached retirement age, the promise felt woven into the fabric of adulthood. The idea that calm and fulfillment would follow naturally from the end of work was not just a hope, but an expectation, reinforced by decades of culture and tradition. Jim kept his workbench just as he left it on his last day. A row of screwdrivers lined up by size, an old clock above the pegboard ticking off the hours. For 40 years, the shop floor shaped his days, shift whistles, safety briefings, the steady rhythm of machines. Every morning, he knew who he was and what he was meant to do. The job gave him more than a paycheck. It offered a place in the world, a reason to get up before dawn, a set of rules to follow and people who counted on him. Even the smallest tasks, checking inventory, tightening bolts, sharing coffee with the crew, carried a quiet sense of purpose. Praise from a supervisor or a simple nod from a coworker felt like proof that he mattered. The structure was invisible, but absolute. Time moved in patterns, Monday to Friday, 7:15, lunch break at noon, the slow exhale of Friday afternoons. At home, Jim's stories always circled back to work. His family knew the names of foremen and line workers he'd never met outside the plant. His hands bore the record of decades, calluses, small scars, a wedding band dulled by years of use. Work was not just what he did, but who he was. Now, in the quiet of his garage, surrounded by the tools of a life's labor, that identity lingers. The world outside still hums with activity, but inside, the outlines of purpose have begun to blur. The first weeks after retirement can feel like a breath of fresh air. There's no alarm clock, no rush to beat traffic, no urgent emails or shift changes. Men like Jim often describe a quiet thrill in waking up to an open day. The relief is real at first. Days stretch out, unhurried. There's time for breakfast, for small repairs, for reading the newspaper cover to cover. The pressure that once pressed in from every side seems to lift. But as the novelty wears off, a strange unease can begin to settle in. The hours that once felt like a gift start to feel empty. The old routines, coffee with the crew, the hum of the factory floor, are replaced by silence. Luis, a former shop owner, remembers tidying his garden in those first months, proud of every weed pulled and row planted. But by the third month, the satisfaction faded. "I started to wonder if I mattered to anyone anymore," he admits. "The phone stopped ringing. My days felt quieter, but somehow heavier." This is not unusual. Research shows that up to 30% of men experience symptoms of depression within their first year of retirement. The relief phase doesn't last as long as many expect. Instead, restlessness and self-doubt often slip in quietly, mistaken for personal weakness or a sign that something has gone wrong. For Jim, for Luis, and for many others, the shift from freedom to unease isn't a failure. It's a common, if rarely discussed, part of leaving work behind. Carl stands in his kitchen at sunrise, coffee cooling in his hand, the house quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. For 30 years, the Navy set every hour of his life: first call at dawn, drills at 10, mess at noon. Even after he retired, the discipline stayed with him. He kept a calendar taped beside the phone, each day marked with neat blue lines. But now, weeks pass without a single appointment. The uniforms are boxed away, the phone rarely rings, and the old sense of mission has faded into the background. It isn't just Carl. Across the country, men who once thrived on routine, factory foremen, teachers, engineers, find themselves adrift when the scaffolding of work disappears. The days, once broken into shifts and deadlines, now sprawl out, unstructured. Research from the National Bureau of Economic Research shows that in the 6 years after retirement, mental health declines by 6 to 9% on average. The numbers tell a quiet story. It isn't only the absence of a job, but the loss of the invisible framework that work provided. For Carl, the change feels physical. He wakes before dawn out of habit, but there's nowhere to be. Meals lose their rhythm. Even the simple act of getting dressed can seem pointless. He remembers the sense of belonging that came with a uniform, the camaraderie of shared purpose. Now, the silence is both a relief and a burden, a reminder that the world no longer expects anything from him. The mind, once shaped by routine, begins to drift. Purpose, once so clear, becomes something to search for rather than something given. Dr. Elaine Harper describes retirement not as an end, but as a profound psychological adjustment. She calls it the role loss transition, a phase where men must learn to live without the daily signals of worth that work once provided. The mind, she says, takes time to recalibrate. For months, even years, the absence of a job's structure and validation can feel like standing in a room where the walls have quietly disappeared. What many interpret as personal failure or regret is, in reality, the brain's attempt to adjust to a new rhythm. Professor Mark Tanaka's research adds another layer. Across cultures, he finds that the myth of automatic fulfillment is especially strong in countries where retirement is framed as a reward for decades of service. In Japan and the United States, advertisements and institutions have long promised that peace and satisfaction will arrive the moment work ends. Yet, the data tell a different story. Up to 40% of retired men report that the loss of routine and purpose leaves them unsettled unless protective buffers like marriage, regular exercise, or part-time work are in place. These factors soften the impact, but they don't erase it. Despite this, emotional preparation remains rare. Only a small fraction of retirement seminars, just 3%, address the psychological side of leaving work. The rest focus on finances, as if money alone could guarantee peace of mind. The discomfort men feel is not a personal flaw. It is the natural outcome of a culture that taught them to expect fulfillment as a given, not as something to be rebuilt. The myth, not the man, is the culprit. And so, the real work of retirement begins, not in the numbers, but in the quiet task of redefining who you are when the old answers no longer fit. Today, nearly a third of retired men quietly face the void left by vanished purpose. Fulfillment doesn't arrive on a schedule. It must be shaped, not inherited. The real challenge isn't escaping work, but redefining meaning when the old structures fall away. Sometimes, the hardest work begins after retirement. Share your thoughts below.